Good morning, friends. It's Bob again, bringing you another reflection on God's forgiveness. And we are in a long-term immersion. That is, we're going to immerse ourselves and marinate in the forgiveness of God and how grandiose and how fantastic and how cleansing and how weightlifting that is to us. Now, last week, I talked about the idea of the ocean, and I did a series of reflections from the Pacific Ocean down at PB, at Pacific Beach. And today, what I want to do is shift gears and say, we talked about how enormous and how cleansing and how fantastic God's forgiveness is, using the ocean as a metaphor for how big it is and how thorough the cleansing is. But today, and for this next couple of posts, I want to continue the theme of the Lord's Supper and the sacrifice of Jesus on the cross and the price, the costliness of forgiveness, because I think it's important for us to continue to keep into our minds the idea that we have been forgiven an enormous debt. It's like Matthew 18 and Jesus telling the parable of the unforgiving servant, and he's been forgiven something the equivalent of the national debt of all of Israel. He's been forgiven that much by the graciousness of the King. Now he expects us to forgive in that same way. But it's important to say that our forgiveness was bought for us at a very high price. Our forgiveness was bought to us. We were redeemed. That ransom price was paid with the life of God's one and only, his only Son. Now, you've heard me say this before, but I love my son. I love my kids like crazy. And if it was left to me to choose between them and you would be smoked. It would not be a race. I love them with a tenacious love. And the Father's love is shown to us in that he gave his one and only Son. And Jesus took on our entirety of our debt. And that there was a price that was paid, a debt that was owed, and a price that was paid by Jesus dying on the cross for us that was nothing short of fantastic, that was very expensive. I love the way that the American novelist Mark Twain describes this whole idea of forgiveness being costly and how there's something of a fragrance about it. He compares forgiveness to the fragrance that the violet sheds on the heel that has crushed it. That there is a crushing and there's a fragrance that comes from that crushing, and that fragrance is something kind of fantastic. And it is something that Jesus bore for you and for me. But we come back to the Lord's Supper and the elements of that to remember the price that was paid, how costly our forgiveness was. Because as we reflect on how costly that forgiveness was, then we become forgiving people. We become forgiven people and become forgiving people. Forgiven people and forgiving people at such a great cost. Thanks for joining me this morning. Let's think about that and reflect on that as we go into this weekend, thinking about forgiveness some more. And as we investigate that more on Sunday morning and the consequences of unforgiveness, be thinking about this and reflecting on it. God will be speaking to you. I love you. God bless you.